Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty Run territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'm chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel via Zoom is Michelle Duncan and Ron Merritt. Our administrative personnel is Crystal Harland, and our assessor is Stephen Lobenstein. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1, 3, and 5 on our docket today. Mrs. Harlan, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Assessor, would you please state your full name?
Stephen Lobenstein.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, would you please state your full name?
My name is Jarrett Story.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Lobenstein and Mr. Story.
Good morning.
So we have 3 items on our docket today. Let's begin with item 1, file number 24-1683-1725 Inkster Boulevard.
Sure. The roll number is 14. Oh, sorry, just give me a second. Sorry, the roll number is 14064131600. We have a assessed value of $30,134,000. This is split between 2 different classifications, 60 other and 40 institutional property. One's taxable and one is taxable school exempt. So this property actually is going to be, a portion of this property is going to be demolished. So there's going to be a supplementary notice that's issued when we have completed that demo. So I feel that going forward, since this value is going to change for 2025, that this property should just be confirmed today, and that we'll deal with the supplementary when it comes out. And I believe Jarrett's in agreement with that.
Thank you. Mr. Story?
No questions, Madam Chair. Mr. Levinson is quite correct. If you view my brief, you can see that there's a SUP that is pending. The work has been completed, so we're simply waiting on those new documents to come out, and we'll deal with it then. So for the purpose of our exercise today, we'll simply request confirmation of the file.
Thank you very much, Mr. Story. Ms. Duncan, Mr. Merritt, any questions from either of you?
No questions, thank you.
None, thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, what is the 40S portion?
Oh, there's the WRHA has a laundry facility in the property at the back of the property. They've been there for
Okay.
like 20
And
years.
which portion is going to be demolished, or is it, can it
It's
be
all been
off that way, or?
no, it's all been completed. So it's the front section. This is the old Sears distribution warehouse.
Oh, okay.
So they redemised the front part for the new ownership, change of use. It had been a difficult property to rent for many years, so they've redemised it and repositioned it. So I believe there's a loss of some of the space, but Mr. Levinson and I have been talking about it, and we wrote to the department requesting that the supplementary be issued as the work has been completed. So I assume once we're through the thick of the appeals, I presume we'll be back again on the supplementary.
Back again, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, then that will conclude item number 1. Item 3 on our agenda, file number 24-2508. This is 90 Hutchings Street. Mr. Lobenstein.
Yep, the roll number is 14064318000, 90 Hutchins Street. We have an assessed value of $11,296,000. You can see the roll years for 2025 and the reference dates April 1st, 2023. We have a effective year built of 1997. We have wall height of 24 feet. It's a masonry bearing wall as a construction class, and zoning's M2 manufacturing general. The land area is 187,091 square feet. We have a leasable area of 93,520 square feet and a land to plan of 1.99. So moving further down on page 2, you can see that the request for information is there. They did ask for an extension and it was granted, and they sent in their information. There is an older sale of this property in 2008, as you can see as well on my page 2. So if we move down to my page, actually my page 9, I'll give you a moment to get there. You can see where it's located in the Inkster Industrial Park. So it's by Church, Burroughs, and Shepherd. And Keewatin and Inkster obviously are the borders of the Inkster Industrial Park. You can take a look at my overhead view of the property on page 10. You can see where the access point is out to Church. You can see where the trucks back in. There is obviously a fenced off area as well. Another view as well is on page 11. You can see the overhead doors and where the trucks back in and out. There's also a rail line that's running behind it. This runs through all the Inkster Industrial Park. And on page 12, you see there are some photos. You got some exterior photos of the loading docks. They have mostly above grade. They do have one ramp leading up to a dock and a larger one further as well to the right. Page 12, you can see the interior of the loading bay area. Page 13, you get an idea of the reception area, and it looks like a lunchroom as well. And page 14 just shows some more of the warehousing area. Same with page 15 and 16. As I did mention on my page 17, they did send in their information. These are leased out properties. So looking at, oh, I just lost my page. There it is. Looking at the income expense mailer, you can see that the leases were signed in 2021 and 2018. They are step-up leases from $675 to $750 for the first one. And the other premise that's 29,000 square feet also steps up from $525 up to $625 in its final year. And moving forward onto my page 19, You can see under the year end of 2022, they have a net operating income of $661,986. So for the assessment, we're going to move back up to my page 3. On my page 3, you can see the rent comparables. So I've broken up the rent comparables similar to how we assessed this property and how it is rented out. We're looking at similar size properties in a similar area. So we have Oak Point Highway, Logan, Hutchins, and Omens Creek and Inkster are all in, very close to the subject property. The leased areas range from as high as 61,400 square feet to as low as 29,979 square feet. The average wall heights are similar to the subject property. They're as low as 18 feet, as high as 27 feet, and the effective year builds are similar, ranging from 1974 to the oldest to 2000 to the newest. Then you can see the rents on the far side there. We have rents ranging from $7 a square foot for Inkster all the way up to $8.50 for Logan. Or sorry, $9.68 for Hutchins, my mistake. So now we're moving on to my page 4. We can see that we've broken up the premises similar to how the building's being rented out. So we have 54,420 square feet and 39,100 square feet. The rents range from $6.95 a square foot to $7.66 a square foot. This gives us a potential rent of $677,725. We apply a 3.5 vacancy, 3% for the expenses to get our net operating income of $621,292, which is very similar to the subject property. And we are applying an overall capitalization rate of 5.5%. When we capitalize that net operating income, we get a capitalized value of $11,296,000 rounded. So that's how we've calculated the assessed value. Moving to my page 6, you can see the cap rate study. We're showing the 20th to the 80th percentile for industrial properties. That's second from the top. So 20th to 80th ranges between 5.35 to 7.3. So this is where the vast majority of the cap rates fall for assessed values in the city of Winnipeg. We have some outside sources there. They range from 5.5 all the way up to 7.5. So this property is within the range of these outside sources as well. And yeah, so that's my presentation. We feel this property should be confirmed at $11,296,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lobenstein, page 1. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I note that the property was built in 1994, and the city is applying an effective year of 1997. May I ask why that small adjustment was made, firstly?
I'm guessing there was probably an addition at some point.
Okay.
Just give me a moment. See if I have it in my notes. It's gone through extensive interior alterations. Yeah, I don't have probably due to the many alterations, they have quite a few permits out for $500,000. So maybe they've just upgraded the standards of the building.
Okay. And the model, is this all modeled? Is that the?
It's all modeled.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. And did you select the rental comps, or are those?
Yeah, no, I selected yours.
Okay, great. Now, in terms of the cap rate, that is modeled as well, I suppose. Does the model consider that very low land to plan, just slightly sub 2 to 1? Is that considered in the model's output of the valuation of the property?
It is considered for the rental rate, but not for the cap rate.
Okay. Okay, and I'm just going to go through these rental rates very, very quickly. So and I had sent you a message about this. I'm not sure if you were able to see it. It was sort of late into the day yesterday. But number one on Oak Point Highway, are you aware that that's a semi-gross lease?
We have it as a net lease.
Okay, but so when am I correct in assuming that you have a database of rents and you select them from there, and like do you look at the INEs or anything like that when you're selecting the rents to ensure that they are indeed triple net leases?
Yep, we do. We
You do.
look at them. Yeah.
Okay.
So they would send in their lease information, and they would tell us that they would check off if it was net lease or gross.
Right, but when we look at the rent roll for that property, I was able to review it. They're showing that it's a semi-gross lease, and they're paying the base rent plus a small management fee only. There's no CAM and tax on that rent roll. Is that your understanding?
As I view it in our system right now, they have it just checked off as net lease. I don't have what you're viewing and what I'm viewing seem to be different. I'll have to review that though and see if it is net or semi-gross.
Okay, that'd be great. And can we agree that that is a somewhat different type of property than ours? That would be considered a vehicle service center. I believe in your model you would consider that a VSG or a CMSV or VSR or some such thing, commercial vehicle service.
It's slightly different, absolutely. We're looking at what we're looking at is the size, wall height, effective year built, for the most similar for the subject property. Yeah, the usage is different. I will agree to that.
Okay, and typically in the market and in your model, quite reasonably, the vehicle service centers generally command a higher rental rate versus a warehouse, for example. Is that a fair comment?
I mean, in this situation, you're not really seeing that, but some certain types of most service garages aren't 61,000 square feet, so they're usually quite smaller.
Right,
So,
but there's a dedicated service center at the back of this property, correct?
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, they seem to be getting a rent that's very similar to the subject property.
Right, but if you were, just to be fair, if it is a semi-gross lease, if you were to net it out, that figure would be lower, correct?
I could possibly be lower, yes, if it is semi-gross.
Okay, number two, and of course, Oak Point Highway is not quite in the Inkster Industrial Park, correct?
Well, no, but it is fairly close.
Right. As is Logan, that would be in Omans Industrial Park.
Yeah.
Okay, and that building, so that building has 27-foot wall heights. Are you aware that that was a custom build for that tenant?
I don't know why that matters. Many buildings are custom built.
Well, if it's a custom build, then presumably we can make the assumption that part of the build would be amortized into that rent, would it not?
I would not assume anything like that. No.
Okay, and the goings on at that property, they are working with recycling and reusing cartons and pallets, and it's leading to it, and that would generally lead to a high degree of wear and tear on the property. Is that a fair comment based on your experience?
I don't have experience in recycling, so I don't know. I mean, the difference between the wear and tear for an operation like that compared to what's happening in 90 Hutchings Street.
Okay. Okay, 78 Hutchings. Now that was interesting. I couldn't find a great deal about that, but my understanding from my review is that they appear to be doing manufacturing for automation and robotics. Is that correct?
A moment. Just by the name alone, I can't tell what they do.
Okay. All right. And then 1670. Okay, so we handle that property. That building, are you familiar with that building in the interior and the quality of the finish?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's move on. Now, in terms of the capitalization rate, 5.5 from our perspective is very low. Now, you mentioned that is model derived, but can we agree that the brokers for what we'll call industrial B properties are suggesting no less than 6 up to a high of 7.5? Is that correct?
They have 6.5 to 7.5. I mean, what their definition of industrial B and A is, I'm not too sure. But
Oh.
there is, as you can see, they do have a 5.5 as their lowest as well.
That would be for an A, though, correct? For single tenant A?
Again, I mean, they only look at so many properties within the city. They have a very narrow definition of what A and B is. So, and we look at all the properties across the city, and we have to apply a capitalization rate to all of them.
Yep.
In this situation, we've applied a 5.5.
Okay. Does the city, though, consider this property to be an A or a B?
As you can see on our chart, we don't differentiate between A and B. There really is no definition between A and B. It's all subjective to, I guess, Kohler, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, they all have their own definition. So we don't define.
Right. But based on their definition, because you've submitted their information here, based on their definitions, generally this would not be considered an A. Is that a fair comment?
I don't have their definitions in my evidence.
Okay, we can speak to that in a moment. Okay, so then, and then, oh, finally, the photos that you have here, those are the marketing photos that were online. I have those as well. So, okay, I think that's fine. Oh, just lastly, very quickly, you'd mentioned something about the NOI based on the income statement on page 19. But that, of course, we're looking at the rental rates. We're not looking at a lease fee analysis, rather a fee simple analysis. So that NOI includes deductions for those op costs, and then recovery that's being counted and under income. So that would not be aligned to our methodology today, correct?
No. What we're trying to do is derive and predict a net operating income to find a value for this property that could potentially sell in the market. So sell the market. So in this situation, somebody coming in would definitely look at the income that's coming in, look at the recoveries and the expenses, and then look at the net operating income. So in this situation, the net operating income is important to look at because you can derive it from an income and the expenses.
Okay, and did you consider based on what you just said, did you consider the NOI for 2021?
I see the NOI for 2021 as 87,668. That's not the year we're working in. We're working in 2022. I don't know what happened in that year. So we know that this building is generating that income.
Right, and if we look at the top line, and I agree that, well, I don't agree that we should be looking at that NOI on a fee simple analysis, but we should certainly be looking at the top line. And can we agree that the basis for that NOI being 87,000 in 21, which is germane to our discussion today, and it being higher in 2023 is based on the fact that the rental income, the very, very top line, is about half, and that's based on the property having 50% or so vacancy in the previous year.
That's very true. Okay. So yeah, but they don't have vacancy anymore. You can see the leases in place. So
right. So would that? So if you were someone looking to purchase this property, would you not consider the fact that there is a fair bit of risk in that if one of the tenants vacates, your top line income is effectively halved, and then the NOI that you're talking about is effectively decimated versus what it ought to be at full occupancy? And would that not be tantamount to more risk?
Absolutely, there's risk in purchasing a building and having tenants in it and having vacancy. We do apply a vacancy in our model, and that our vacancy is being applied after we've already applied net rents. Like our model is looking at net rents, so that's net of all expenses, and we're still applying a vacancy. We're still applying expenses, a shortfall. So I mean, I think we've taken it into consideration, the risk that's involved.
Okay. I think those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Lovenstein.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Story. Ms. Duncan, do you have questions for Mr. Lovenstein?
Thank you very much.
No questions, sorry, you cut out there.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt.
I have no questions at this point. Thank you very kindly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lovenstein, Can you just take me through those rents again? It's really tiny on this page, sorry.
I had to zoom, and when I zoomed in, they disappeared on me. So, yeah. So, for unit number 90A,
Page am I looking at? Sorry,
so you're looking on my page 18
18.
at the top.
Right there. Right.
Yeah, it says unit number. So that's for 54,428 square feet. The lease was signed in 2021. It goes to 2023, so it's 2 years. The first year they have a 675 a square
Right.
foot, and the second year they have a 750.
So at the time of the reference date, the rent would have been 750 on that.
No, in this situation, because it doesn't, it looks like, yeah, sorry, yeah, in terms of the reference date, yeah. So if it was signed in October 16th of 2021, so by the time the reference date rolled around for 2022, yeah, it would have been 750. And then so for 9B below it, 29,108 square feet, if my eyes don't deceive me. Or is that 39,000? I'm
It's
sorry.
39.
39, yeah.
39,100.
39,000, yeah. They have 5 years signed in 2018, expires October 31st, 2023. So they'd be sitting at 620, it looks like.
The bottom number or?
I think that's the fourth one.
Okay, 620. Okay.
Yep.
I was trying to understand where they were at in those step ups.
Sure.
And every year there seems to be an increase year over year, slight increase, but a slight, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Story.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, of course, we are here at 90 Hutchings Street in the Inkster Industrial Park. So, we've established the physical property reasonably well here. We have 93,520 square feet of leasable area. As of the reference date, the property was leased. As we've mentioned, the building was built in 1994. The wall heights are 24 feet, but we do have a very, very low land to building at only 1.99 to 1. So we would expect to see something between 3 or 4 to 1, ideally. 4 to 1 would be ideal, 3 to 1 would be standard. 2 to 1 is very low. This creates some issues in terms of challenges for loading as per the assessor, and it's all angled parking. So we do consider that in the application of an appropriate cap rate. In terms of the rents, we just spoke to them, but you can see that the first unit is leased 54,420 feet for $7.50. That's a lease commencing October 16th of 21 at $7.50. The smaller premise, 39,100 feet, is leased at a rate of $6.25. There was previously vacancy in this property, as we've established. So we've looked to those rents to determine that they are indeed appropriate. So we've done a secondary check by looking at the market in a sort of broad way here. We've included 18 rents for your consideration that support the rent. So we're not out of line. You can see that the average of those rental comps ranges from $6.68 with a median of $6.55. We haven't put a great deal of weight on that. Instead, we would indeed put a greater deal of weight on the actual contract rents in place. Now, we'd mentioned, or Madam Chair, you'd mentioned that there are some steps in this building, but we also note that there are also inducements such as free rental periods and that sort of thing. So we feel very, very comfortable applying an overall rent of $6.98, which equates to a market rent per annum of $652,536, and that's on page 12. So we're using the actual rents in place, looking to the market to ensure that they are indeed at market, and based on our findings, they might even be a touch high. But we have to consider that there are also inducements, so this makes sense. In terms of the shortfall and non-recovereds and vacancy, we are aligned. There's no dispute there. So really this is a debate about the cap rate and the rents. So our position is that the cap rate of 5.5% for an industrial building with some of these unique challenges, such as the low land to building and the age, is far too low. It's far too aggressive. We've provided you with a standalone capitalization rate study. At the stage of the game, we've all heard it many times, but we've provided some sales. I do note that the assessment department has not provided any sales to support their cap rates in this cycle, and it does appear that there's no bifurcation in terms of quality, single tenant, multi-tenant, A or B. Now, in terms of our discussion today, we've talked about the differentiating factors between Class A and Class B and industrial. And that is indeed, those definitions from CBRE, Cushman, and Colliers are included in our capitalization rate study. So I'll go over this once, but if you bear with me, Colliers suggests that Class A buildings are newer, fully featured buildings of high quality steel and concrete construction, modern efficient mechanical and electrical systems, high ceilings, good loading capability, air-conditioned offices, extensive yard storage, and truck marshalling areas. Our property does not meet that criteria. It is a B. That is our position. The Bs are considered, this is from Colliers, average to good quality industrial buildings, somewhat dated construction, good quality functional space, less extensive features, usually characterized by lower clear heights and fewer shipping doors. And effectively, the Cushman and CBR are generally aligned to that. So it's Class B would typically considered older product that may have some issues such as lower land to building, as is the case with our property and subject today. It is certainly not an A. So we've proceeded on the basis that this building is indeed a Class B, and that is supported by the brokers. So with that said, we also, I have to point out, we have a sale on Hutchings. And we calculated it at 6.79 cap. The owner in their submission, in their response to the city, suggested that they bought it at a 7.2 cap. Now, it's an interesting property because it will have application to both of the properties that we'll be speaking about today, because it is half new, half of it is built in the modern era, and then about half of it or so is much older. So the owner, when responding to the city, said that they purchased that property with a 7.2 cap. We have worked it up, and we believe it to be a 6.79. So based on that, we believe that our application, our cap rate for this property of hold it up, got them confused. 6.5 is well aligned. It might be a touch low. Based on the Hutchings sale, which is the most relevant sale. It's in the same industrial park. It's within the reference state, and we've not simply accepted the owner's admission that it's a 7.2. We're suggesting that it's 6.8 based on our workup, and that's all been provided for you. So we believe that a 6.5% is cap rate for this property is very reasonable. We are taking into account that it's not in bad shape or any such thing. You can see by the photos, it's reasonably good quality functional space. It does have that incurable land to building issue. So based on our analysis, we're capturing the positive elements, but we're also considering some of the incurable deficiencies. So a 6.5 in this context is well aligned. The balance for the brief includes the marketing photos. I do note that the model in this scenario is supporting an increase of almost 40%, which we believe to be extremely aggressive, and it's simply not borne out by the facts that we're seeing in the market. So with all that said, Madam Chair, we are requesting a value today of $9,196,000, and that is of course based on a site-specific review of the property. We're using the actual rents and generally the cap rate that has been put out by the model is far too aggressive. It's far too low at only 5.5. We're using a cap rate of 6.5, which I believe to be quite conservative. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, questions for Mr. Story?
Yeah, just a few. In terms of your rents, so you use the actual rents in place,
Yes, indeed.
and you would agree that those are net rents?
Those are net rents. Yep.
So, and the definition of a net rent is a rent that is net or of all expenses. So it's just the rent for the space, and there's no expenses included in that rent, correct?
For assessment purposes, we use triple net rents. We don't consider CAM and tax. We use the base rent only. That is correct.
So we've used the base rent, and then you've gone to apply our model, which is fine. You've applied 3.5 vacancy, 3% expenses, a shortfall rate to get your NOI. So you've already taken out the expenses from the property, and now you're taking out more expenses from the net rent to get an NOI of 597,714, which, as we've already talked about, is quite a bit lower than the subject property at 661, I think we said. So would you agree that maybe just using the net rents would have been a better way to go than reducing the NOI even further?
No, let's back up for a moment to make sure we're speaking the same language here. The standard allowance for vacancy is 3.5%, which we've agreed with, but we've also pointed out in our discussion that the vacancy 1 year prior to the year leading up to the reference date was almost 50%. We would not use 50% based on that, based on the occupancy at that time. The very purpose of applying a standard market vacancy is to avoid just that, is to avoid these large peaks and valleys in terms of vacancy when the property does experience some level of vacancy. So effectively what we're trying to do, Mr. Lobenstein, I think you are aware of this, we are trying to stabilize the vacancy over the effective useful economic life of the property. So we wouldn't use 0% today, and we wouldn't have used 50% in the previous cycle. So if we are applying any sort of adjustment to the vacancy, it would be based on the market perspective of where the assumption of vacancy might be. If we have long-term chronic vacancy, we'll make an adjustment. But in this case, 3.5% is, it's not a further deduction. It is simply the application of a very reasonable, if not low, vacancy rate that is meant to be stabilized over the useful economic life of the property. Now, in terms of the expense ratio, that expense ratio of only 3%, I believe that to be very, very low. I also believe that when the city went from 7 to 3, I don't know that they adjusted the cap rates, and that has effectively created well, it should lead to a 30% or a 30-point swing in the cap rate, or a 25 basis point or 30-point adjustment to the cap rate. I'm not sure that was done. So a 3% expense ratio is very, very low. You would typically expect 2% alone for structural reserve. So I don't think that is a large deduction. And then I think that's basically, and our shortfall is simply simply the cost of maintaining vacant space when it arises. And of course, that's a function of that very low vacancy. So when you're mentioning the NOI that is recorded on the statement, you're also miscounting, in my opinion, the recovery, the operating cost recovery. The number that you should be looking at is the rental income. And that is based on the contract rent in place. So, you have advertising and leasing costs are in there. You have bank charges, that type of thing. So no, when we're doing a fee simple analysis of the property, we should be looking at a base contract rent with standard rates and allowances provided for vacancy and shortfall and expenses over the useful life of the property, which are not in dispute. So no, I think that using the contract rent is exactly the proper methodology in this context.
Okay, just on your cap rate here, on your page 17, you have a chart showing investment grade A and B. Is that Altus's chart, or I guess Orion's chart now? Is that your guys' chart?
That is our chart. So just to be clear, what we do is we look for sales in the market. We've provided a sampling of sales. I note that the city, of course, has not this cycle provided any sales, but we look to we look to sales in the market, we look at the cost of money, we look at the different economic factors that are at play, we look at supply and demand, and then we also consider the brokers' reports. We're careful to acknowledge that the brokers' reports are effectively marketing circulars, so they might be a little bit more optimistic, but we do find that they're very, very helpful in terms of tracking compression in the market cycle over cycle. So generally, and we've mentioned here what our conclusions on the compression in the cycle. So it is our chart, and it is based on that research. So we're looking at a number of factors such as cost of money, rates, obviously, supply and demand, and then reviewing sales in the market that are deemed to be clean and arm's length sales. So we've provided a sampling of sales supporting our conclusions. The brokers' reports support our conclusions, and the compression in the market is captured here as well. And you'll see that we are recognizing that there is some amelioration in the market. We're not disputing that. Our cap rates have generally expanded. So I think we've done a pretty good job of reviewing the Winnipeg industrial universe and determining a cap rate that makes sense on a site-specific basis. So we're not modeling anything. We're simply looking at each property, site-specific review, and applying a cap rate that is supported by all of the evidence that we review in the time leading up to the cycle.
Okay, I guess my only question is, you said you've reviewed all your evidence for cap rates. You have cap rates in your investment grades from 5.5 up to 7.50, but on page 16, you haven't supplied any cap rates that are low as 5.5. The lowest one. So
our
I'm just why you have not supplied those cap rates here.
Oh, yeah. So just to be clear though, we're suggesting that investment grade is 5.5 to 6.25. That's the latest and greatest, the highest and best. We don't have sales. We don't have a sale at 5.5. We could have, I suppose we could have said no, the bottom is 5.75, but we do recognize that in the last few years, and you'll be aware of this working in industrial, that there are some smaller industrial condos that have come onto the market. There's a limited supply of them. So typically those are the types of properties that we would expect to see a 5.5 on, not these larger, very, very typical older industrial properties in the city's biggest and maybe oldest industrial park. So 6.5 is well supported here. There's an argument to be made that it should be higher, but 6.5 is quite conservative.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Lobenstein. Mr. Merritt, questions for Mr. Story?
I think the in-depth analysis that has just taken place, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan?
Yeah, just a question. I might have missed something. I know earlier on in your questions to the assessor, you had indicated that it wasn't net rents, it was semi-gross rents. But then in your response to questions from the city, you mentioned it was net rents. So maybe, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I see. No, thank you, Ms. Duncan. The question that I had asked of the assessor of his evidence, there's a property on Oak Point Highway that we reviewed. It's leased by West Trans. It's been leased since 1990. It was a high rent. I thought that there was something atypical about it. So I looked into it and I determined from the rent roll, and I sent it to Mr. Lobenstein. Now, granted, it was later into the evening, it was after working hours, but I did send him an email showing the rent roll that shows that it is not indeed a triple net rent. It is a semi-gross rent in that they pay the base rent and a small management fee. So my issue is not with the rents in subject, but rather the rents that are being used by the assessment department as comparables.
Oh, that's great. That clarifies for me. Thanks. Madam, can I ask the city assessor one question?
Of course.
Does the model take into consideration sales and comparables in its cap rate?
In terms of like comparable like properties that sold?
Yes.
Well, we do look at properties and we do our own analysis and reviewing them and studying them, but all of our cap rates are model driven.
Yeah, sometimes you guys do use sales comparisons, so I was just wondering why you didn't.
We would
rub it in.
If the property is valued on income like this one is, we would only be bringing in income information. Sometimes we'll use the sale of the property as supporting evidence if it's recently sold. So within the reference period, so that would be the only time that we would use comparable sales if it was the actual property selling.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Mr. Story, when you talk about your cap rate study for your industrial, is it limited to these 5? Or do you have others that weren't presented?
Oh no, we've looked at a number of sales, but we take great pains, Madam Chair, to make sure that we're not looking at sales that are atypical. So obviously we don't include anything that would be considered between related parties. We don't consider acquisitions or divestments generally, or we review, but we're very careful with divestments and acquisitions by large REITs, mutual funds, and that sort of thing. We're very careful with portfolio sales. But we do review everything that happens in the market. We don't include every single sale that we review. Some of them are excluded on the basis that I've just mentioned. But what we're trying to do is give the board a general sense of some of the sales in the market. And as Mr. Lovenstein pointed out, we might not have a investment grade like a latest and greatest smaller industrial condo that's selling for 5.5, but we do recognize that is indeed that is part of our ecosystem now, even if we don't have a sale that's relevant to our sort of very small window in terms of the reference date. So no, these are not all of the sales. These are the sales that we have looked at that we believe are representative of the market. And again, we ensure that they are backed by the money markets and the rates, as well as the brokers' reports. So it's a multi-step process. But no, they're not all of the sales that we look at, but we do believe that they are the better indicators for the Winnipeg's industrial universe relevant to our reference date.
Thank you for that. On your page 16 then,
Yep.
I'm just looking at these ones. These are the ones that made your cut or made your new clean sales. They're not.
These are the ones that we were able to derive a proper cap.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hutchings as obviously close to this property, 6.57 cap. What does imputed mean when you say type?
Oh, yes. So it's imputed because it didn't sell from somebody wasn't buying the rents in place. So there's a secondary step that we have to go through, and we look to what the owner should reasonably expect to achieve in that property in terms of rental rates. So we've actually been we're fairly high on that one because the asking rents at the time were $750. Now, as a general rule, you'd be looking at about 80 to 85% of asking rents in order to determine what one could reasonably expect. So 80% of 750 is 680. So and actually that's interesting because that's well in line with what we're presenting today at 7%.
So, in other words, it is modeled also.
It's not modeled, it's reviewed by
the fact that you've taken a portion of the rents, that's a modeling process. You didn't use what was in place. You used a different number. You developed your own model, 80% of rents and.
Well, I'm careful to call it a model, but it's to not call it a model, but it's yes, we do a review and an analysis of the market in terms of the rents. But it's when I think of a model, I assume that's sort of you put a bunch of information into a algorithm and then it kicks something out, and that's not what we do. We do it by hand. So,
No,
but you're right. It is.
That.
Yeah.
You've developed a methodology for dealing with certain situations, right?
Precisely. Yep. Precisely.
And I'm not questioning the legitimacy of it. I'm just trying to understand.
Oh, I understand. Yep.
Yeah. And this one though is quite a bit smaller than our subject, correct?
27,000 feet. Yep.
The wall height is less too.
18 to 20 feet. That's right. Yep. Slightly lower, but now, and they're not all going to be exact, but you know, the owner for that one suggested a 7.2. We have the sales mailer, so and the city, that's a sales mailer that was put out by the city and responded by the purchaser to the city, so they would be aware of that sale. So when we see a cap rate, Madam Chair, of 5.5 in the Inkster Industrial Park for a property of this vintage, when we know that there are sales that are clean, that are relevant to the reference date, that gives us some pause. So we're not suggesting 7%. We're suggesting 6.5 in this scenario. So I think that's all supported. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I have no additional questions for you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, would you like to make a summation?
I have no, excuse me, I have no summation.
Thank you. Mr. Story?
Yep, just very quickly, Madam Chair, thank you. The rents, the contract rents in place are supported by market. We've reviewed them. We look at the actual income in place. We're not considering any sort of large risks, such as the scenario in 2021. And I believe that our capitalization rate, as I mentioned, is conservative. There's a case that it should be higher, but I feel very, very confident in the value that we've presented to you here today. And I will point out once again that the modeled increase cycle over cycle is extremely aggressive, and we don't believe that it's supported by market factors at this stage. So I will leave it there, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, that will conclude item number 3. Minute here. Okay, moving on to item number 5 on our agenda. This is file number 24-1665, 1707 Church Avenue, and I understand there's 2 issues at play here, valuation and burden of proof.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Lobenstein, if you could speak to the burden of proof request first.
Sure.
And then we'll move on from there.
Okay, the roll number is 140644305000, 1707 Church Avenue. We have an assessed value of $8,114,000. So as you can see with my recommendation, I'm seeking non-cooperation under section 53(3)B of the MMA or MAA. So if you go down to my page 16 or 13, sorry, you can see that we've sent the letter out. You can see the address where we sent it to Calgary, Alberta. You can see the mailer, the blank mailer that was never filled out. Now, usually in these situations when we have a non-compliance and they haven't filled it out, we send registered mail. We send a mailer a second time for them to get to show that we have sent it. But in this situation, it's a little different because they actually emailed us back. They had a 311 inquiry asking us for an extension, which we granted. So the 311 inquiry was, the date created was in March 2023, the 29th of March. Awanda Adamson sent it in asking for an extension. There was multiple ones they asked for, but one of them was 1800 Inkster Boulevard, which isn't this property, but it's part of the properties. They asked for the roll number 14064430500 as part of the extension. So we know they did receive the mailer. They messaged us. They had a 311 inquiry asking us for an extension, which we did grant, and they did not send the mailer in after that. So they would be considered non-compliant. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Story, questions?
Yeah, no, just very quickly. So I've never heard it said before that a secondary mailer wasn't sent out based on a request. So just to be very clear, though, there's no, you mentioned that you had a request. That's not in evidence, and there's also no signed registered letter in evidence. Correct?
So as I mentioned, there's no signed registered letter. If you would like, I can send this evidence in right now in terms of the correspondence that took place between us and the person asking for an extension. I got no problem sending that in. There was a 311 inquiry, and there is some emails back and forth. So
that would be good, because we can't accept the penalty without a signature. Clearly.
Yeah, I don't have any problem sending that in.
Okay, wait a second here. This would be considered late evidence. So we need to go in camera to consider whether or not we will accept that. So give us a minute. We're going to go in camera. The panel will
Sure.
discuss and we'll move on from there. Okay?
Sure.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the panel has considered whether or not we would like to see the late evidence to assist in our decision, and we would. So, Mr. Lovenstein, are you able to email the information or send it quickly to Mr. Story and to the Board of Revision so that we can take a look at it and then you can review it for us?
Yeah, I'll send it to the board's address right now and Mr. Story as well.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
Yes, go
The
ahead.
assessor can just send it to the Board of Revision,
yeah,
and then I'll take care of sending it to the
Yeah.
applicant.
yeah, you'll send
Okay.
to the revision address? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Okay,
thank
I'll
you.
send it right now.
Thank you. And Mr. Story, once you receive it, we'll also have to receive it ourselves, so we have a bit of a delay. Would people like a 5-minute recess once we receive it in order to go through it
Yes, please.
themselves? And then Mr. Lovenstein, once we finish our recess, Mr. Lovenstein can take us through it again.
That would be ideal. Yeah, we would
Okay,
appreciate that.
so let me know when you receive it, please.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm just going to get it in the OneDrive files. I have it right now. And then I will put it in the hearing evidence folder for you. And then I'll send it to Mr. Story.
Okay.
So, sent it to Mr. Story.
Mr. Story, it has been sent to you.
I've not yet received it, but I'm hitting refresh.
Okay.
So
Madam Chair, it's called extension letter, and
Okay.
it's now in OneDrive
Okay.
for the panel members. And now I'll rename it later,
Okay,
and now I'm going to,
let's wait until Mr. Story has it. It hasn't got it yet.
okay, I have it now.
Okay, so then it is 10:12. How about we recess until 10:20? That should give you enough time to quickly review it.
That'd be
And us a chance to review it too. Us being the panel, and then we'll come back in and Mr. Lovenstein can take us through it again, okay? So let's recess now until 10:20, please. Thank you. I'd like to call our meeting back to order. Okay, we've all had the chance to review the late evidence submitted by Mr. Lovenstein. Mr. Lovenstein, perhaps you can take us through it.
Sure. I'm going to start actually all the way down on page, I guess 7.
7, okay?
So this is the 311 inquiry we had from Awanda Adamson requesting the extension. So this is a process we have where they call in or email in and it's filtered to us. As you can see on the bottom of the last page, page 10, there's 1800 Inkster Boulevard. And within that, they have 4 roll numbers. And of these 4 roll numbers is the one that we're dealing with today, 140644305000. So this was part of that request. As we move up through the document, you can see an email exchange between a member at the Assessment and Taxation Department, a worker. On page 4, you can see that an email was sent to us saying that Ms. Adamson does have authorizations for the 3 properties below. You can see the 1800 Inkster Boulevard, again, with the roll number there that we're dealing with today. So as we move up through the document, you can see that we have sent an extension letter. So on page 3, you can see we've attached, please find your extension letter. And moving forward, at the very top of the document is the extension letter that we sent, indicating that we agreed to an extension of time until June 30th, 2023. Submission can be mailed to the address below or emailed as well. So there was 2 ways to send it in. So as you can see from this evidence, we know they had received the initial mailer. They knew the deadline of the initial mailer. They asked for an extension. The extension was granted, and they still failed to submit the INE. So I feel that this is a case where they are non-compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovenstein. Mr. Story, questions?
Just one very quickly, Mr. Lovenstein, you've mentioned that this shows that they received the document, but can we agree that this shows that they're aware that there's the submission date, but it doesn't actually show that they received the form? Is that fair?
I guess in this evidence, they're not saying they received the form, but they are very aware that they need to fill out this information and that they needed an extension to do it. So,
okay. Yeah, no, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Sorry? Can't hear you very well. Mr. Merritt?
I'll just turn this up a little. I have no
Very,
questions.
very faint.
Okay,
You're very, very faint.
okay. I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Duncan, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lovenstein, they're obviously including this property under a different address, 1800 Inkster, together with 3 other roll numbers. Where are those other roll numbers located?
they're also, I mean, I know a few of them are in the Inkster Industrial Park. One of them, 1800 Inkster actually does, let me just double check here, abut against the property we're looking at today.
Okay,
So they are basically, they're all, the same company owns all these properties.
so for their purposes, they're including this property under an 1800 Inkster address for their own.
Yeah,
whatever.
they've put it under the address, but they have the separate roll number.
Okay. Did you receive anything on those other roll numbers?
To my knowledge, we did not.
All right, thank you. Mr. Story, do you have anything you would like to present on the issue of burden of proof?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have much to add. We're just obviously seeing this extension letter now, so it's requires some further investigation, particularly when we have owner-occupied properties that are, as Mr. Lovenstein said, there's a number of them. So our position is that we don't have a signature showing that it was received by the owner, and therefore the penalty, based on the fact that it is quite severe, should not be applied in this instance. But in terms of a presentation, I have nothing further to add than those comments, and I thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lovenstein, do you have anything to ask Mr. Story?
No, I have nothing to ask.
Mr. Merritt?
I have none. Thank you.
Ms. Duncan?
None, thank you.
Okay, so the panel will go into camera and make its decision regarding the burden of proof request. Thank you. Okay, the panel has considered the issue and we are granting the assessor's request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation based on the evidence presented by the assessor. So Mr. Story, that means the burden of proof falls to you and you will start with your presentation first, please. Can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted, Mr. Story, but we can't hear you.
There he is. He's
There we go. Okay. Are we?
Better, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. Okay, so this is 1707 Church Avenue, roll number 14064430500. Roll year is 2025 with an assessed value of 8,114,000. Classification is 60 other and the liability is taxable. For the purpose of our exercise today, based on the application of the penalty, Madam Chair, we're simply going to request that the file be confirmed at this stage. And that is my presentation, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Lobenstein, I'm assuming no questions, but this is your chance.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Merritt,
I have none, thank you.
thank you. And Ms. Duncan,
No questions.
thank you very much. Okay, then. I guess that will conclude our discussion on item number 5. So unless, Mr. Lobenstein, did you want to present anything? I'm certain that you don't.
No, I have nothing to present.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that will conclude our discussion on number 5. Would anybody like to make a summation?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Then with that, we've heard all the items scheduled on today's agenda and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you, Mr. Story. Thank you, Mr. Lobenstein. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye
See
now.
you. See you. Bye.
great. I will take us
Back you go.
just a moment, please.
Yes, thanks.